what does the toxic culture do, however, to an organization? Well, it, again, not only is it not enjoyable, but the environment, I think you mentioned that about the environment, where it's not just about having the high performing KPIs and goals and, hey, we have the SMART goals, we have all these tools to make sure they monitor how everybody's doing. So they, hey, at the blink of an eye, I can see how my different performance metrics are doing. Yet I'm not having that immediate performance streamline on my people. And what does that look like? Again, high turnover. It looks like a lot absenteeism. It looks like really a lot of loss of innovations or having a lot of problems, creating more solutions to those problems, which is also in essence increasing the cost. And what happens at that point too is we're not able to then reward our employees with salaries that are livable either. So then you start understanding that the toxic culture, a culture that's unhealthy, is going to have also a direct impact on even how I'm able to reward my employees because it's costing me even that more to produce.
All right, guys. Welcome to the Winner Circle podcast with Jay Adewole, and I want you to know today we're going to bring you something very interesting. You know, on this conversation and on this platform, we bring you conversation that help you win in business, in leadership, and in life. So today's episode is specifically for leaders, and it's very important for leaders, founders, executive, and anyone responsible for guiding people through growth, through pressure and change.
Mhm.
Because the truth is, most organizations do not struggle because people do not care. They struggle because leadership, systems, and culture fall out of alignment.
Mhm.
And when trust is low, clarity is missing, and performance begins to suffer. Even the most talented teams can find themselves stuck in chaos, burnout, and constant rework. That is why this conversation matters. My guest today is Hanna Bauer. She's the CEO of Atnomics Enterprises. She's a leadership strategist. She's a speaker, trainer, and a consultant with nearly 3 decades of experience serving as a CEO, a board chair, an executive director. One interesting thing about Hannah is she has helped leaders and organizations bridge the gap between where they are and where they want to be. She brings a rare combination of a real-world executive experience, systems thinking, and leadership development to the work of transformation. She's a Lean Six Sigma black belt, which is a big one. All right. She's a Baldrige Excellence Examiner and one of the select faculty trusted by John Maxwell to help develop leaders globally. But beyond all of that, our work is grounded in a powerful insight when systems lose rhythm. Everything downstream struggles. That perspective became the foundation of our framework, Atnomics, just the Atnomics, which helps organizations restore alignment, strengthen trust, and perform at a higher level under pressure. So in today's episode, we are talking about the leadership of hearts. That's the art of leadership. That is restoring trust, clarity, and performance. We will explore what causes organization to fall out of rhythm and how leadership can stop fixing symptoms and start addressing the root causes or the root issues. And what it really takes to build a resilient culture that performs well without burning people out. I'm telling you, one thing you need to know that today, this is going to be a powerful conversation and you have to be ready for it. Because I believe strong leadership is not about pushing people harder. It's about creating the clarity, trust, and structure that allow people to perform well. Welcome to the Winner Circle, Anna.
Thank you so much. And you're singing my lyrics. You're singing my song. I love it. I love everything.
That's a
Yes,
profile.
frameworks, everything.
You're welcome. Welcome
Yeah.
to the show. So,
Thank
one of the
you.
most powerful thing about your message is that most organizations do not fail because people do not care. They fail because their system are out of alignment. So, what does misalignment actually look like inside an organization?
Okay. Well, no, that's not.
Your website is your hardest working employee. If it's not building trust and converting visitors, it's costing you growth. At Nixall Designs, we don't just build websites, we build business assets. We specialize in high-end website design, strategic redesigns, and high-converting landing pages. From custom e-commerce experiences to integrated lead capture systems, every pixel is shaped for performance. Our strategy-led approach ensures your brand identity is clear and credible across every device. We bridge the gap between creative design and the technical systems that drive real results. Stop settling for a website that just exists. Start growing with a digital presence built to convert. Look credible. Grow confidently. Book your free consultation today at nwixalldesigns.com.
That's a really true statement in many things, right? I mean, especially like if you look at like the nonprofit or even some of the organizations were basically very founder led, very vision led. So you have caring people, even in government units, right? People that are working with people that are in need of help to where their driver really is to make a difference. And we see a lot of these amazing workers, amazing missions and visions, yet the people that are wanting to be able to make that difference, that impact, are running on empty, low, negative, and all kinds of other things come along with that. Mental health issues. They have the stress, toxicity, even toxic environments really that happens. And that is one of the symptoms is the inability to have a clear way to be able to communicate that feedback. What is that feedback loop? Even what does it look like to win? What is a win today? I mean, I know we can be busy all day. We all have carried that as a badge, right? But one of the symptoms is I don't know what a win was at the end of the day. Yet I know I've been busy the entire day. That would be an immediate way that somebody can see where they are. And that's a quick way also to get into burnout, because if we don't know what a win is, then we also not grabbing onto that fulfillment that comes in from the work that we do with purpose.
So we have to know what a win is in the first place. So
If they can.
now, can leaders even tell the difference between a people problem and a system problem?
That is such a good question. Okay. So here's the deal. You have a couple of things, right? I mean, we're very good and it depends. You have the industries because we can talk about different industries. You have very compliant industries, compliance driven, where there's a lot of different external certification processes and things that need to happen in order to keep safety in place, right? Like you have certifications for safety, you have certifications for being able to do things. So you have industries that by nature have got to be very compliant. Yet that compliance doesn't take away the fact that you're still working for and with humans. So that is one of the parts is understanding, first of all, the industry, the nature of the work. There's some works, right? Like I said, like again, a lot of times the nonprofit, even some of the governmental units where there's a lot of empathy, right? That is needed. I mean, you're starting there because of a cause. You're looking to move the needle in because of a certain issue that you're trying to solve as a solution. And there may not be quite clarity on how to accomplish that one because it hasn't been done. It's a need. And there may not be a clear pathway, but that in itself can be completely draining if we don't have a way to catch what we're learning. So you have the two parts. And one of the first things is to understand what is the culture, what in from my industry. And not only that, but what are the current ways that we are keeping in line with what we need to do? Again, like a hospital compliance is going to look different than, for example, parks and recreation, where there still has different parts. But understanding, first of all, what is that? But however, when we understand that, we also have to understand that we have got then to be intentional to make sure that the other side is being taken care of. Because I do still need to take care of the human operating system. And if I'm mainly for that vision, I need to be clear that I have the processes and systems so that we know how we're moving forward. So how do we create that is one, awareness. Two, the question that we should be asking in excellence overall is how do I know that they know? Like, okay, no, but we have the process for that, or we have the system for that. Well, how do I know that they know we have a system for that, or we have a process for that? What does the system look like? A lot of times, the not knowing that doesn't mean that it doesn't exist. It exists, but it might be in somebody's head. It exists, but it might be, what's the process? I don't know. Call so-and-so. That's the process. The calling so-and-so is the process. So understanding where you're at, even understanding the vision and the mission, and that will be the first place. Once we understand the industry, even where we're operating, really what comes into alignment, what is our North Star as leaders is the vision of the company, the mission of what we're doing at this time, and absolutely the values of how we do this. And that is how we start the alignment process for what we're doing.
Interesting. You talk about alignment a lot, like aligning up. So, alignment itself, in your own view, why is it critical for elder leadership and sustainable growth?
So have you tried ever riding a bike that is out of alignment? Like when we say alignment, it's basically like the driving wheel, right? And then the
Mm.
tire might be going to the left, and then your little handles going to the to the right. So it's kind of like that. Eventually, you might get used to it, right? You might think like, oh, I know I'm going to have to move my wheel to the right so that I can go to the left, right? We start coping with it. We start looking, but it costs us even energy to be thinking about that. The lack of alignment is either I haven't stopped to fix it, I haven't taken the time to go, do it, or I just really want to get somewhere, so I'm going to write it, I'm going to cope with it, right? So the not being aligned is going to cost, first of all, more energy. It's going to cost this whole part of coping. Yeah, we're going to figure it out. We're still not clearing the problem. We're kind of operating in our own dysfunction because, in a sense, that's what we call it. It's a dysfunctional. It's not working to specs. But not just that. The other thing that happens is, well, you misuse parts and you cause strain on the other parts. You will cause, if it's in a car, you'll see that when misaligned car, one tire is spent even more than the other tires. Even the new tires that you have, if you are not in alignment, which is what they do in alignment every time, you're going to wear out the other ones faster, or the whole thing may be compromised, not just the tire itself, but the entire structure. So when we talk about alignment, is understanding that being misaligned has a cost. It's costing burnout. It's costing having to apply resources that should have been applied to somewhere. They're going to another place, and it's not necessarily to create that healing, to create that fulfillment, to go towards a vision. Is really, in a sense, to be able to survive in the dysfunction. So, in which is what's happening a lot of times with the systems, right? We're not looking at the solutions. We're looking at how do we manage it? How do we do it? And sometimes it comes out of goodwill. Like you're talking about, it's not because people don't care. It's because we go into sometimes in the organizations like all hands on deck, because it's urgent and we're all, we just need to come up with a solution, y'all. We just need to come up with a solution and not understanding that a solution, even in implementing a solution, is going to create another problem. Every time you implement, I come from change management, black belt in Six Sigma. One of the things that we do is changing all the time. We can change to eternity, honestly. But what to change? But we also understand that whenever we introduce a change, a new form to the process, it's going to have an impact on the rest of the process, not just in that process itself, but in the systems to which the process answers to or delivers to, right? I mean, one of the things, so understanding that part in alignment is, first of all, for leaders, what does internal alignment look like? Can I tell? That's a fair question. How do I know if I'm straining myself on something I shouldn't? That's one, it's awareness. The second one is, once you have awareness, is defining that. Okay, what does this look like? What would it look like different? So being curious about asking those questions is the first step to not only finding out what's misalignment, but also aligning.
Well, thank you so much for sharing that. So, what it means is organization can still look successful on the outside while being misaligned underneath. Correct?
Yeah, absolutely. We do that a lot, don't we? Just in life, we can all dress up, look good, everything there, and internally,
Yeah, and it's
God,
broken.
this whole thing. Yeah, and the same thing happens in organizations. But that's why the question comes in. Sustainability, that's where it starts to show up. Is this sustainable? Is this something that can be kept up? And you understand, there's that's what we talk about when the rubber meets the road. Because when does that show up? When does it show up that maybe my internal things are not matching the external? A crisis comes in.
Of
So
course.
definitely now suddenly a crisis is gonna not introduce misalignment, it's gonna expose the misalignment. And a lot of times the crisis comes from the outside. The other way
Mm,
is you actually have an amazing opportunity. Oh
mm,
my gosh, hey, we can go for this. We want to go for it. And you can't
can.
because you are not aligned to quickly be able to seize on that, because if you do that, everything else falls apart. In
Mm,
order for me to take my key player so we can do that, there's nobody left in the bench line to lead this program, to be able to lead this stuff. So I can't go after the very opportunity we've been working our entire time to go after. That's where it shows up.
thank you. Oh,
You're welcome.
that's a lot to take in. So let's talk about trust a little bit, because that's very, very valid when it comes to an organization. So in your experience, how does trust get broken in organizations, even when leaders have good intentions?
Well, when you do doesn't match your words, like we say, like you say something and you don't do it. Or even our values to the outside, to the customer, hey, it's something like we value customer experience. How was your customer experience? And we'll go and we'll do a survey and we'll have, all this part. And then I take it, thank you for filling out the survey. And you don't do anything with that information. That's a way of breaking trust with that customer, for example, right? That's just a simple one. We think sometimes that by asking the question, then that shows I'm interested. That shows that, all of this, that I care. But that's not enough. That's the beginning, because what that does is set up an expectation on the other side. If I don't have already the intention and the capacity and capability to be able to deal with that information, I'm already starting to build a pathway to.
Still losing customers because follow-ups are slipping through the cracks? POVCRM brings your leads, conversations, appointments, payments, and automated follow-ups together in one powerful platform. Manage everything from one unified dashboard and never miss a beat. Stop chasing your business, start growing it. Visit povcrm.com and start your free trial today.
Break trust. Same thing goes with my teammates, my employees. If I bring them to the table to be part of a meeting, hey, we're going to debrief or have some ideas. I mean, I see a lot of times this with having representation, right? Making sure we have representation from all these different groups, from all these different functions. And representation alone is not enough. It's integration. We got to know how are these ideas integrated, because that starts breaking the trust too. So same goes with the external customer. When they do give some feedback, like, what does that do? Is my experience really going to be different? What would it look like if it's different, if I don't have internally a way to handle it? But even internally, when I do bring people to the table, and it's great that we have them at the table, but it's not just about having a seat at the table, it's having a voice at the table. And if I don't have a commitment on how to be able to integrate that, trust is immediately going to be broken, because it's going to be, well, whatever happened, we talked about it, already 2 meetings ago. Whatever happened with that? I don't know. Immediately you stifle trust, you stifle innovation, you stifle communication. And when you don't have communication, you don't have trust. I mean, again, it's the beginning part of trusting is to be able to communicate. And how is that? What do you do as a leader with that communication is going to build that trust, or it's going to break it.
Trust or break it, which is very important word for every
Mm-hmm.
leader to take note of. So when we
But
talk
yeah.
about trust, when trust has been lost, because I believe in when something is damaged, we think about the solution. So when
Mm-hmm.
trust has been lost,
Mm-hmm.
what does it really take to restore it?
Well, one thing is valuing that. I see a lot of leaders that don't value building trustworthy organizations. It's like, hey, it's more based on the position. You basically do as you're told, the paycheck and this part. So that's the whole attitude. So I think, again, from the leader perspective, is understanding that, yes, you can lead, I guess, in a sense, or you can manage a process by that way, but you're going to be missing out on a lot. Trust takes time. Trust takes effort. It builds relationships. It's not easy. Anybody who's ever been in a relationship, anybody who's ever dated anybody know that. They're hard. And there's all of these other intricacies that go around it. There's all of this, there's your good
Trust.
days, there's your bad days, right? I mean, it's the same way. You're building relationships with another human. Every human is going to respond in a different way.
Mm-hmm.
Trust is a way to be able to form relationships and actually maintain those relationships. So even just understanding that a leader that knows that trust is not just a nice to have. For in leadership, trust is our currency. That's how we get things done. You don't need a leader to do something we already do. You need a leader to take us to a place, a vision that hasn't yet been accomplished, mission that is not yet alive in our communities. We need leaders that are going to be that pioneer, and that's going to take trust. Every time you try to improve something, you're going to have to basically go to that trust account and do a withdrawal. Hey, trust me that this change is going to be better off for the rest of us. So understanding that we are constantly withdrawing from this trust that we're building with people to go with us to a different place. So how do you do it? First of all, understanding that that's how you get things done. That's your currency. If you're talking about deposits, so you have to think of it, how are you making the deposits? How are you building those trust accounts? And we say that in our money. And, this is a trust, right? I mean, what is the value? The value is according to how much you trust it. Same way in leadership. We cannot separate it in a different way. How do you develop it? Well, you have to have a plan. You have to understand, well, what does that trust look like? What does that trust? How am I being accountable to myself on building this trust? How am I implementing the relationships? How am I integrating this in just my way of being? It's not something I do. It's part of who I am. And how am I checking that?
Interesting. So what you're saying now is you build trust back through, I mean, there's a lot of ways when you're in a relationship and there's issues and you try to build the trust back, different ways. I mean, we might not really touch that today. So, but now there's also mistakes that I believe leaders are making because when you're making an 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 example there, you might try to buy the person back, or if you're in a relationship, or you might actually be hurting the relationship the more while you're trying to get them back. So for you as an expert, what mistake do you think leaders make when trying to rebuild trust?
Well, first is rebuilding it in the way that they think it should be rebuilt. Because a lot of times trust has been broken because they haven't asked the other person what happened. For example, when somebody leaves an organization, right? Because people don't they leave and you may not be able to have them back and they were key, but those exit interviews, understanding what happened, asking that instead of assuming why they left. And then I'm going to try to build up, make sure the rest of the team is, I'm going to work very hard on whatever my assumption was for where that person left. And I may be missing it altogether. So I'm
Hmm.
still, as a leader, caring, right? I'm still putting in a lot of energy. And I might even carry a chip on my shoulder. It's like, well, I changed and I did all this, but that wasn't the problem to begin with. So in trust, one of the things is checking any assumptions that you may have for why this rift may happen or anything like that, right? So yeah, check the assumptions. The other thing is that there has to be a pathway of trust. Understanding that, hey, it's not just going to be built just like that. But there has to be a pathway both ways. And it might be also trust that you don't have on the team. Maybe the trust is that you haven't delegated in a while because you don't trust your team. So it's not that they don't trust you, it's the other way around. I don't trust my teams. What does that look like? I feel like I have to do everything. That's what that looks like for a leader. Like, no, I better just take it because last time I told them, like, hey, take this as your baby. It just completely failed. And then I had to do it at the end anyways. So there's a trust relationship where I'm now carrying all this as a leader.
Mm.
So understanding that there has to be a pathway to both
Pathway.
building trust with them, but also that they are building trust with me so I can check how to delegate, how to be able to give to give out the work that needs to get done.
So it's very, very important to build a pathway. I mean, pathway is everything has a pathway. Every system has a pathway. You have to start this way or that way, but there must be a way to get started. So it's very, very important. Thank you for sharing that. So now let's talk about clarity and performance.
Mhm.
There are organization. There's an organization I was actually dealing with a while back, and I was meant to. They were just ineffective, but they were working. They were busy.
Yeah.
They have overtime and all that. So my team, we went in and we try to brush them up and look at what the problem is, and we found out that they were busy,
Mhm.
but they were not effective.
Right.
Meaning they don't really understand their role. There was no when they bring them in on board, they don't even have like a
Onboarding.
onboarding process where it tells them the goals. They don't have nothing. They just bring them in and say, okay, this is what you do, and they don't really understand. So, and if you look at it, a lot of businesses, a lot of organizations are busy,
Yes.
but they are not necessarily effective.
Yes.
How does that lack of clarity create confusion, rework, and burnout?
My gosh, it's huge. It creates a lot of confusion. One, because everything becomes a priority, everything becomes urgent, everything becomes important. So even if you look at that, you will find leaders that find themselves in organizations like that where everything is urgent. They're putting out fires for the first two halves of the day, right? Like the morning half and then the beginning of right back after lunch. And you have leaders that really can't go on vacation and enjoy it because they're having to text all this stuff and everything, right? Because they are the beginning and the end of the process.
Hmm.
And that comes because of that misalignment. One thing that, and this is part of my story with Heartnomics is, as you mentioned, and when you were introducing me, I lived with heart disease for about 10 years through as a child. One of the things that came out of that was the innovative heart surgery that I had, and it's called a heart ablation. I was the first child to ever receive this type of surgery. And what I found interesting once because I didn't know the impact, I didn't know everything that had happened. I mean, I knew the pain, right? I mean, I knew what it was like to live with the disease. I didn't understand the whole impact and what they had actually done. I just knew they had gone in there and they had burned some spots. So that was about it. So when I actually heard the story, when they did a documentary on it for the hospital, because it's a medical breakthrough. I understood what they had done is, for example, in my case, was that I suffer from very fast heartbeat, so tachycardia. So my heart would suddenly go and fire when it will, just speed up
Hmm.
from like being regular 60s to like 180 to over 200 beats per minute. And just like
Wow.
that, be a sneeze. Yeah, it could be a sneeze. It could be I was asleep. It could be anywhere, just as a kid. Pass out. But it wasn't just that. The other thing that was happening was arrhythmia. An arrhythmia is an irregular heartbeat. So suddenly it will go super fast and then it will like flatline. It will go and then it will go slow and it will go fast again and it will go slow. And it wasn't like in a rhythm, right? It happens. Naturally for us, it happens. So once I started looking at that, now as I was hearing the story as an entrepreneur, as a leader, as a mom, right? First of all, like, oh my gosh, I can't imagine my kids going through this. But I realized that the problem that I was really solving and facing in my business was organizational tachycardia and organizational arrhythmia. The arrhythmia came from the lack of clarity, lack of understanding priorities. That's why suddenly the one beat was up there, then it was slow, and it was all the silos that we have in organizations. But in the tachycardia was in that consistent beat, not knowing even when to stop, which is what I find so many of organizations and leaders, that busyness, and there is no rest. Having gone through heart disease, it was exhausting. What was the cure? The heart surgery was the ablation. And what was that? They basically burn away all of these extra knots because the less that you have, the greater clarity for the energy to flow through,
Hmm.
which is exactly what I do. That's what Lean Six Sigma does. Lean is not about taking on one more thing. It's about removing away. I can tell you, being a speaker, doing a lot of keynotes, it's a lot harder to get ready for a 3-minute speech over and one where I have an hour to speak it. It takes that much work, right? To be able to get rid of, make sure everything counts. Every word counts. And that's what happens in what you're talking about, where we are very busy, but there are 8 wastes in Six Sigma. For example, over processing is a waste. Overproduction, inventory is a waste. What we see, what we call bureaucracy, right? Where we're looking from one process to other process, like this overly done, repetitive things that honestly, that for me was those extra knots, that arrhythmia, and honestly, that tachycardia, that what it needs to happen is we need to burn away. So my challenge for those organizations is not one more thing we need to take on and learn, but what is it that is working for us? And you're only going to be able to do that once you know what the vital parts of your business are, and once you know what your business really is. Where does your money come from? Where does your talent come from? What is the talent that you need to have? And really, what is going to be of value to both your people and that you serve internally, and what is the value you bring to the outside? Once you have that, you start looking at everything through that filter and you remove it. And that's what makes you effective.
All right. Thank you so much for sharing. So now let's look at a little bit the root causes and
Yeah.
organizational health that a lot of people really don't address. They just want to solve the problem without understanding the root cause.
Yes.
I believe when you solve the problem without understanding the root cause, I mean, you can solve the problem, but the thing is, it's still going to come back again because you don't know the
Right.
root cause of it. So, would you, from your experience, would you want to say why organizations fall into the trap of addressing root issues than just solving the problem?
Sure, because it takes time. Culture is quick drive through. I want to look into that. It takes time. Again, you're talking about the word root.
Yes,
I
the
can look at the
main
tree
problem.
from now, right? I can look at the tree. I can tell you what the color of the leaves. Tell me, what does the root look like? It's going to take me
Mm,
digging. It's going to take me a lot longer than me just to let you know what kind of tree that is than it is for me to tell you what that root looks like and where that could be a problem. It's going to take time. Still, that is one of the things that organizations, why do they fall into the trap? Because there's always this myth of that the time is going to take me to find out the root is not going to justify us adding
mm,
one more solution and one more solution. And what you're doing there is inefficiencies. Not only you're creating inefficiencies, you're creating strain. You're creating a lot of strain in the system. And not just looking at that in the roots, again, understanding, like I said earlier, you again introduce a solution, if you are not a leader that is looking at this systemically, that solution is going to, you want it to. I mean, the whole purpose of the solution is going to impact the other systems. Not understanding how it does is one of the biggest trap, or thinking that I'm assistant on my own, can do whatever essentially in my business what I want, and it's not going to take any effects. That is short sighted. Cause and effect. I remember times when I had my business, we actually thought we had a problem with the distribution center. We kept on getting all these returns from these boxes. And like, oh my gosh, they're being just so careless. They're just trying to do all this stuff. Come to find out after doing a root cause analysis, which took me time, the problem wasn't in the distribution. The problem was in the salesperson who wasn't checking the zip code with the address. Simple solution, costing us thousands of dollars in returns. What was the solution? Put in the software that would check the zip code to the address, just needed to turn it on. Immediate savings, $60,000. But it took asking the questions, it took understanding the process, and also poor distribution people. They were getting their hours cut, they were getting reprimanded. Even some people, left the job because, hey, they just couldn't keep up with the expectation of reducing the amount of the distribution, that not being able to deliver a package. They were the ones being reprimanded, not the sales team, and definitely not accounting. Because what I did accounting is like, hey, y'all, this is happening. The people that were receiving, in a sense, the punishment or the reprimand or were being mocked were the distribution people because of return packages, when really the reality was not even there. It was all the way in the sales department, in the computer, and honestly, it was in the IT team who had not turned that on.
Wow. That's very, very, very interesting to know. And let's just go further a little bit. I just want to make sure I go into your experience. Like, a lot of our listeners want to learn a lot from this conversation, and especially when it comes to organizational change, because I know you have you are a veteran with change management. It's something you do over and over again. So for you, it's a question, right? Because I've heard so much in the management consulting world, they often say one word. They say a high performing organization often does not have an healthy culture. So the question is, can a high performing organization also have an healthy culture?
No, it's not sustainable. I mean, and you can see that with our bodies. I mean, you have some very amazing leaders. My goodness, they're doing great things. And then a health diagnosis that may suddenly, from not having one to they may no longer be with us 1 year later, 2 years later. So you see that in our bodies. Organizations are living organisms. It's the same way. So we have like it's a living organism. It has its waste, right? It has its things how it multiplies. It has the vitals to a business. It needs oxygen. Hello, money. If you don't have money, that's the oxygen, right, for going. So no, you cannot have unhealthy cultures. It's not going to be sustainable. It's going to cause a strain, just like anybody. Just think about the way that your body, how it is. So what does the toxic culture do, however, to an organization? Well, it, again, not only is it not enjoyable, but the environment, I think you mentioned that about the environment, where it's not just about having the high performing KPIs and goals and, hey, we have the SMART goals, we have all these tools to make sure they monitor how everybody's doing. So hey, at the blink of an eye, I can see how my different performance metrics are doing, yet I'm not having that immediate performance streamline on my people. And what does that look like? Again, high turnover. It looks like a lot absenteeism. It looks like really a lot of loss of innovations, or having a lot of problems, creating more solutions to those problems, which is also in essence increasing the cost. And what happens at that point too is we're not able to then reward our employees with salaries that are livable either. So then you start understanding that the toxic culture, a culture that's unhealthy, is going to have also a direct impact on even how I'm able to reward my employees, because it's costing me even that more to produce. So I've been there. That's how I even got into what I'm doing. I was there because I had a very toxic culture. And yes, I started with a change. And what happened is, hey, we did good because immediately, right? Like anything, oh, good, it's a relief, because you get the immediate pain out of the way, which is what I did. I went with my processes. We need a process for this. We need the system for that. I got it. But then it wasn't sustainable, because guess what? I lost sight of the very people I was doing this for. I stopped connecting with them, and that's what we need as humans. Oh, just a basic need. We need a place to belong. We want a place where we feel valued, where we feel seen.
Mm-hmm.
And I
Mm-hmm.
wasn't doing that. I had
Hmm.
to reconnect with being able to build that rapport. That's where my behavioral analysis started coming in when I started implementing DISC. But then, now that I had those pieces together, not only did we save money, but we were able to innovate at a time that was very uncertain, a time that where we were being disrupted as a market.
Thank you for sharing.
Yeah,
So
it was.
let's go to your personal story. I know you mentioned your personal story earlier. You know, it's a very incredible, powerful story. You shared that surviving severe heart disease and a pioneering heart procedure shaped how you think about systems and rhythm. So how has that experience influenced your leadership philosophy? I noticed you didn't mention about that earlier.
Yeah, well, one is understanding that my having a heart problem didn't mean I had a lung problem, yet it affected my lungs. Having a heart problem that also it affected my muscles, it affected my there was things I couldn't do. My body parts were fine, everything was good, but when my heart wasn't beating right, everything else shut down. So, and it's the same thing for my philosophy with leadership. Our heart is our people. It's part of it's not the entire system. There's all of these other parts, right? There's the people part, there's the processes, there's the technology part, there's the learning management part, there's the knowledge management on how we're doing things. There's the governance, there's the compliance, there's all of these other things. But again, if I'm not taking care of the heart, I'm not going to be able to make sure that all these other systems are operating to their full capacity. So that is one of the things I did understand. There was a lot of things I didn't get as a kid. There was, again, how did the heart impact me? Not just only the painful in the heart, but also the breathing. I couldn't breathe. Even the breathing itself was at times, sometimes even a dream. So understanding through a child's eyes, not knowing, well, I couldn't explain to you, well, my heart is going like this because blah, 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 blah. All I knew is I couldn't breathe. And when I was looking for somebody to help me, all I needed was somebody to just stand there with me. There wasn't really much they could do for me, except for really being to be that other human next to me that will stand with me at a time of uncertainty, at a time where we didn't have the solutions in place. And I believe that's what your work teams are. That's where your team dynamics comes in. It started shaping that it's not just important that we know what needs to get done, but it's just as important on knowing who we're doing it with and who we're doing it for.
Thank you for sharing that personal story. I still want to just push in a little bit to that personal story. How would you say that the personal health battle become a professional leadership framework for you?
Sure. One is the framework part. I understood we had to do by values-based leadership. So in a time where there was no solution, what saved me, what transformed me was that love, the sustainability, the human aspect, and the excellence. There was a lot of failure in my story. Consider a lot of failure that literally heart-related failure that was deep. So what I had to learn, and it didn't come once I had the surgery. Surgery was one thing. It was a process later on, even looking back into it, things I didn't even realize that where I had to even get a good relationship with failure, a healthy relationship with failure. So in order to be able to understand what failure did, I really had to understand, well, how do I grow from failure? And that's where my internal alignment framework came in. Heart, which is for not only to grow in heart, but to grow in beats. So believe, engage, act, transform. So that's the way that I started seeing there was not much I could do at times when I was in the hospital, but there was still things I could do. Not necessarily what I thought, from other kids or that, but there were things I could do right there in my hospital bed. I could still believe. I could still engage even with what I had. I could still engage with my world in what I could. And there was definitely still an ability to do an action. If it was standing up, if it was moving a toe, if it was like taking a walk, if it was even just going outside and listening to the whatever action that was, knowing that the smallest of action will trample the greatest of intentions any day. And then the transformation that came from that. So for me, the beat method of alignment is what came out of that, which now also translate into the core method for organizational alignment as well.
So that's a very powerful personal story, and I'm sure that a lot of people have their own personal stories that if they can actually transform it to leadership framework, is gonna go a long way.
Yes.
So you didn't let your personal, I don't want to call it, let me just say situation as a then draw you back. You made it an inspiration and you multiply it, and you're giving people opportunity to learn from you, which is a great thing. So now, looking at your life, your experience so far, you've held roles as CEO, board chair, and even executive director. How has this leading role from inside organization shape the way you coach and advise leaders right now?
Well, I think one thing is I'm not a theorist. I'm a practitioner. So I've actually been there. I think we can all teach business theory, but the real teaching came in when I had the payroll of everybody else on my end.
Mm,
When I had to make everybody's payment. It wasn't just, hey, Friday, everybody gets paid, not for the business owner, not for the entrepreneur. It's like
of
Friday, oh
course,
my
of
gosh,
course.
when I have the money in the bank account, right? That's the greatest, one of the greatest teachers. Like, oh my goodness, Friday, I gotta make sure the money's in the bank. So as an entrepreneur, I think that one of the things is that was a real test. So how does it shape me? It was that because the same way with with an executive director, you get your money in a different way in a
Mm,
nonprofit. Instead of having just one consumer, you may have 5, 10 different grants and understanding that each grant you had to report to them in different ways at different times and you had to budget all that. So understanding both when I coach is actually having that lived experience, understanding, well, I went through the same problems, similar. Of course, the scalability is different, right? But they're still at the end of the day, they are very similar, if not the same core problems. It's like a human, right? I mean, we all have different experiences, different backgrounds. We eat different, we have different activity levels, yet we can all still go get a blood test. And the blood test will tell you what a healthy range is.
mm.
It's the same thing with organizations. They all have the same going on, and there's different ranges, different things that we can look into and then be able to apply. The implementation, the integration is going to look different. And that's one of the ways that I help leaders. It's like, okay, how does this look like for you? How do we start walking? Is a lot of times when you're in the middle of it, especially if it's a crisis, or you just lost a key person, or oh my goodness, the way that I make my money or my big client is no longer here. It is difficult to get out of that. So I help in being able to not only see the blind spots, but create a safe arena where we can really talk about all those different opportunities and also possible threats.
All right, thank you for sharing that. So let's move forward a little bit. I know your experience also, most of the things you've been saying is from experience. Don't let me say as an outsider to organizations. So now let's go into your organization a little bit because you just mentioned about you being an operator. The feeling of having to put people on payroll is different from if you are the one, like taking the payroll is different. So how does
Yes.
being an operator change the way you diagnose problems?
Well, definitely as an owner, I mean, you usually take care of a lot of things when you own them versus if somebody else. So I think just in that, diagnosing problems, knowing that the solution is going to cost me. So guess what? I started learning a lot about risk. And I started also learning about impact because you can change whatever. I mean, we can spend all the time. If you want to change something, you can start changing, but should I change it? And once I do this change, is it really going to solve the problem? So understanding and really valuing what we talked about earlier, the root cause, because this is I'm going to invest in this because it is an investment. Is it going to give me the results? So it made me ask again, own the results, but also owning how we were going to be able to respond to it. And that is a difference. When you are the entrepreneur, when you are the owner, the buck stops with you. You're the owner of the
Of
system.
course, yes.
Yeah. And that is hard. It's hard to say, like, oh, I have a systematic problem. Look right here. So that was one of the things, not because, well, so and so didn't tell me, or hey, they didn't put it in the system, or hey, the company hasn't upgraded in this since, oh my gosh. Nope. Right here.
Of
Right
course.
here. So that is one of the things is taking that ownership, taking that accountability, starting forced me really to like, hey, I need to start looking here, which also brought up about the reality that I had to take care of the asset. I had to take care of this as well. Because if I'm not in a good mental space as a leader, an entrepreneur, as a CEO, I'm not going to be able to make the right decisions for my company or my business. I'm not. I'm not going to take the risks I would take normally. I'm not going to be able to go after opportunities. I'm not. So understanding that this is all great and dandy, but if I'm not taking care of the asset here first, we're not going to go anywhere.
Of course, you're right about that. Honestly, there's so much to say, and this conversation is going interesting. We almost get into the
It-
1 hour mark, which is very, very interesting. So, as we begin to round off, right? I would like to ask a question. I have like, just maybe 2 or 3 questions before we round off. If someone that's listening to this show live right now realizes that their team is struggling with trust, clarity, and performance, what would you say should be the first step they should take?
Ask how do you know they are or how do you know they're not? It's like, "Oh, no, we don't have that problem." You gotta
Mm,
know what that looks like, and you cannot get what you don't have. So we know that high performing, high achieving, sustainable organizations also have high trust cultures.
mm.
What does that look like for you? And if you don't know, that's a problem. More than likely, your teammates don't know either. So understanding that, is there clarity on what trust looks like? Because we also grow in trust. Remember, there's things that we're going to try later on, or innovation, especially in a time when we're being disrupted, when you have all these AI tools, when you have technologies that we don't know, it's going to require even a more trust than just doing business as usual. It's going to require doing something different. If my trust account is not high and I don't know what that looks like, I'm not going to be able to bank on that.
So let's touch base on, you're a founder, you're also an executive, also, you're the CEO of your organization. So for people who are in the same level as you are, who are like founder, executive, they're listening right now also, because those are the people that we have listening to our shows most of the times. So what are few signs that their organization may be more misaligned than they can realize?
When you don't have a common language, that's one of the things. For example, when I say something's done and you give me something's done, but to that person it wasn't done. That means we have a language problem. We don't know what done is, you know? If I say, like, "Yes, I'll take care of that," what does take care of that look like, right? In my business, it looks different in everywhere. So even the words better, "Oh yeah, I'll do better next time." What does better mean? So even like that common language, I would say for founders, because it's very easy. A lot with the CEOs and founders, a lot of the weight is on your shoulders. But that's because we also haven't defined what those words are and they mean for our organization. So I would say check your language. The language a lot of times is because the person, like you said, we started this with like, hey, people usually they care. They want to keep their job, especially in this market. People want to keep their job. So they're not waking up trying to mess up the business place. They want to do the best thing. But what happens when we don't speak the same language? We can't. I'm not gonna be able to fulfill the expectations. You're not able to communicate the expectations, right? And we won't be able to grow. So I would say that, and how does that happen is when you move from being goal oriented to be growth oriented. Because when you're looking at being growth oriented, you're really looking at language, linguistics. How are we expressing that language together? You're muted.
One last thing, right? I just want to ask. I mean, in as much as I'm about to, we're getting to the 1 hour threshold or that we always have. So, but the thing is, I still have a lot of questions because it's getting interesting. By the way, so for alignment, yeah, of course. So for alignment,
Yeah.
is alignment something you build once,
No.
or something you keep maintaining?
I mean, look at the race cars. They're aligning not just one time, not at the
Mhm.
beginning of the race. They're stopping over in the
Of
middle of the
course.
race to align. So guess what? If y'all are feeling like you need to align, it's not a bad thing. It's a good sign. That means you're using it. That means you're using the car. That means you're pedal to the metal. If you're having to align, the more you pedal to the metal, the more consistent you're going to need to be aligning. Just again, look at the race cars. If you're using it, you're going to go out of alignment. It's a good thing. It's part of what we do. But guess what? You can't align while you're moving. You're gonna have to stop. I mean, it's like, and I say this to my small business owners, trying to make a change in the small business is like trying to change a car tire in the middle of the highway while going 100 miles per hour. You can't. Okay? It's gonna be. So it's getting into the practice of stopping, of resting, of taking a minute. There's just as much skill needed to accelerate as it does to decelerate. I mean, just look at the cheetahs. The cheetahs, we look at them because, oh my gosh, they go so fast. It's amazing. It's incredible. But in reality, what is so amazing about them is that they're able to speed up and also decelerate just with ease. Because what does that do? It allows them to adapt. And that is one of the things that you have to do. I mean, again, when you're going in a race car, you're going to have to take curves differently than if you were going straight. And every time you do that, it's going to bring the car out of alignment. So as you're having to adapt, alignment has to be happening. There has to be a time where you're aligning with your team, and it's a consistent thing, and it's good news. If you are needing to align more, that means you're actually using the tool, using the organization.
That's great. Thank you so much. I really appreciate. So, the last question, but before then, before I ask the last question, one of our listeners just sent in a question, and the question is, it's still focused on alignment. It said, why is it dangerous to assume things are fine just because people are still performing?
Because again, you don't know why they're performing. Are they performing out of fear? They could. Again, that's going to take a toll. That's going to take a toll on the environment. That's going to take a toll on the longevity there with you. When we're talking about having racing fans, raving fans and businesses and stuff, yeah, it's going to take a toll. Suddenly, next thing you know, if you're a business owner, that person's gone. Like, oh my gosh, your entire future was going to be there. This was the person who was going to take it up. And you don't know. So no, assumption is not good. The other thing is because first of all, you want everyone to be valued. It's not because you say you value them, but there has to be signs that you value them. A way that we give a sign that we value somebody is we ask. Asking is part of that human part, right? We gotta ask, we gotta build that rapport. So building that in building that rapport is, yes, we ask about questions. Again, that's when you talk about instead of assuming, is because in asking and clarifying, we're going back to the basic needs that we have as human beings. And that is the need for safety. When we check assumptions, when we're actually being intentional in finding out how they are, even why they're performing higher, in no way are we going to, if they're high performers, guess what's going to happen? They're going to be performing even more.
Growth doesn't fail because of ambition. It fails because of missing structure. Point of View Consulting helps entrepreneurs, nonprofits, and growing organizations turn vision into clear strategy, stronger operations, smarter systems, and measurable execution. Stop managing chaos. Start building for scale. Book your strategic consultation today at pointofviewconsultinginc.com.
If they're high performers that are on the burnout, you're about to prevent a huge burnout, a huge mental breakdown even. So you could potentially even save somebody's life. And I've seen it happen to where it's checking the assumptions. And honestly, it just makes us more human. And when we're human and we're thriving as humans, we're thriving as an organization.
That's so powerful. And so this is my last question. All right. Even before the last question,
The pre-last question.
yeah, a lot of people keep dropping messages in the box, and another person talked about how do you work in a great environment when I really don't understand the question, so I'll just let that go. I didn't get. So let me just ask my own question. So for the leaders who is trying to hold everything together, founder, leader, whatever, what is one message you want them to remember about leading with a heart and leading with excellence?
Transformation. Because really that's what it does. I mean, at the end of the day, we can have all our T's crossed, our I's dotted, but what's the point? What's the point? And I think that's a lot of times for our leaders is we are that busy and we lose the sight of what it is that we really are. Why is that important? Why is that project to be important to be done at this time? Why is it important for me to do this? And it's honestly that transformation. And every one of the leaders is involved in that work. What does transformation look like, which aligns back to your purpose? We gotta be living on purpose. Purpose in our tasks, there's purpose in our people. And as leaders, knowing our purpose helps us be able to flame that purpose in the people that we work with as well.
All right. Thank you so much. I really appreciate. I believe like if you keep on this conversation, I believe we're not going to finish like in the next 2 hours. I mean, for a long time, I've never really had a 1 hour conversation. It's always ending 30 minutes. Yeah, so it's very, very interesting because it's something that's in the heart of the conversation, which is talking about alignment, which a lot of us most times we just prefer to burn out, especially when we're living in. Coming from New York, I understand how the work environment is because capitalism and people really want to make sure the numbers are together. They really don't care about most times they really don't care about how if everything is aligned together. So far they're making money. They really don't care about that, which is something we need to be worried about.
Yes.
And everything you said, you remind us that leadership is not about making decision or just giving direction. It's
Right.
about creating alignment. And that's one thing I want all leaders to know. That it's about building trust, restoring clarity, and developing systems that allow people and organization to perform, not just only perform better and perform the way they were meant to perform. And when that alignment is missing, I believe no efforts. No amount of effort alone can fully solve that problem. And one of the biggest takeaway for me for this episode is that strong leadership requires more than passion. It requires awareness, discipline, and the ability to recognize when the rhythm of an organization is off, and then have the courage to restore it. Because you need courage to restore it. Because if you are not courageous enough, or you're too prideful as a leader, I'm sure you're not going to be able to restore it. I just want to say a big thank you to you, Anna.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you so much for joining us on the Winner Circle podcast today. And also thank you for sharing your wisdom, your experience, and the practical insight you shared today on what it really means to lead, and not just lead by the books, but lead with your heart while driving performance. Remember the word drive performance. So I just want to say thank you so much again, and I really appreciate you coming, and hopefully in the future, we'll love to have another conversation with you. And for my listeners, if this episode had any value, and I believe it added a lot of value to you, so please be sure to subscribe and share it with a leader in your network, and leave a review. And as always, keep leading with purpose, keep building with clarity, and keep showing up like a winner. This is Jay Adewole, and I'll see you on the next episode of the Winner Circle podcast. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right.